And that was founded by three distant ancestors of mine, 1834. And so from 1834 to roughly 1929, they were engaged in the production of domestic goods. I know where our materials flow. I know where our raw materials come from. I know where our spare parts come from. But the inconsistency in the sort of landscape of tariffs is constantly evolving. I have an old PowerPoint presentation that I've given to customers before, which has a pie chart showing the production of paper by vendor in 1985 versus 2005. And, there were easily 36 different sources of paper that someone could choose from. The term onshoring has been around forever, and we are quoting things now that traditionally we would not have seen. And my customer service department is barely able to keep up right now.
In a world where brands compete for attention, where innovation meets strategy, and where storytelling drives success, join Ken Theriot and Randy Kessler as they dive into the world of branding, business, and beyond.
Joining us on today's episode is Ben Urquhart. Ben is the recently appointed president of New Packaging and Display. That's a family-owned independent corrugated converter in central Massachusetts. Ben, how's it going today?
Pretty well, Randy. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to see you.
Likewise, we're excited to have you on.
So New Packaging, that's the rebranded New England Woodenware, correct?
That's correct. I 8 or 10 years ago, I floated the idea of modernizing our name. I did some effort in, color scheme, logo, and we're slowly allowing it to sort of filter through onto our trucks and our building. And it's, there were too many occasions where customers assumed we were making something we were not.
Yeah, no, that's a good reason to do it. Get aligned with your customers.
So, Ben, tell us about your background, kind of career progression. Have you always been in a role like this, or did you start in a completely different industry and kind of morph into where you're at now, or just kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. I bounced around a fair amount. After college, I did a few years environmental education. I went back to grad school for a forestry degree and worked as a consulting forester for a few years. I had a brief stint in academia where I was a research assistant doing climate change and energy policy work. And then when kid number 2 came along, I surprised the heck out of my father and asked him if he had a job for me here at the box plant. And that was 15 years ago now. And so I have internally worked my way from corrugator supervisor to pre-press manager to production manager to sales manager. And at our most recent board meeting, people made me a president. Maybe I'll figure out what that means soon.
That means you're everything. You're a busy person. So we've known each other for a while, so I'm just trying to think. Like maybe 2013.
About that. About 10 years.
What role were you in 2013?
I was probably the pre-press manager at that point,
Okay.
and that's probably, without being specific about names or previous employers, we had lots of conversations probably about color and color consistency back then.
Yes. Yeah,
and you guys came to us with a certain box need where we needed to prove to you quantitatively that we were delivering a certain level of color precision.
Yeah, this is the days of Flexo Concepts. I think it was PMS 151.
There you go, man. That's exactly what it is. And what was the gray?
Never forget that.
But so when we run that, and still to this day, when we run that job, we are measuring color, at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the run, and delivering, spectral readings of less than 2 delta CMC. And is that too technical for this? It's probably all right.
Not for Ken, yes for me, but.
But no, that was and you guys, and I'll probably bring this up later on in the conversation, but you guys as a customer pushed us in a certain direction, and that served us very well with other people.
Well, I'm glad that I could be a useful pain in the butt.
I don't remember you that way.
Yeah.
So was that kind of going into the family business? Was that something in the back of your mind that you always thought, maybe this is something I do want to do or don't want to do. I know some people just want to stay as far away from that kind of thing as possible. Others kind of know that that's where they're going to end up. Where you fall on that spectrum?
Oh, I've definitely had all of those emotions over the years. I get a little bit of street cred for the 4 or 5 summers that I spent as a teenager feeding machines. As a young person, I definitely was interested in doing something else and going in a different direction. But at a certain point, it became a question of, can I make a difference here? Is there a role for me? Can I handle it? And it's I probably make the slightly off-color joke that it's a funny mix of privilege and responsibility, and then there are very challenging days, but there are a lot of good ones too.
Yeah. So maybe, talk a little bit about, the progression to, it's 2025. When was New England Woodenware founded, and, how did you get here today to be, the premier independent corrugated printer?
Flattery will get you everywhere. So the parent company was called the E. Murdoch Corporation, and that was founded by 3 distant ancestors of mine in 1834. And so from 1834 to roughly 1929, they were engaged in the production of domestic goods. Their raw material was white pine. They owned lots and lots of land, and that wood was cut, milled, converted, and produced into things like this. And this is literally a item from the late 1800s. And I have awesome amounts of documentation, price lists, angry letters from accounting, all sorts of incredible things from business over those decades. I keep one of them. I keep one of those angry letters from accounting over my desk from 1894, because just to prove that nothing ever changes. And if there's time
next
later,
to an angry letter last week from accounting.
if there's time later, we'll do a dramatic reading. Okay. But so that was the origin. In 1929, the name New England Woodenware was incorporated, and it was a joint venture between E. Murdoch, Menasha, and New England Box. I don't even know if anybody at Menasha knows this anymore. And so we were jointly owned by my family and Menasha throughout most of the 1900s. And it started slow. It started as an experiment. They had the land, they had the residual customers, the E. Murdoch, and this is a history tale that might be common for some people, where the way that people shipped goods was transitioning from wooden products to paper products. Corrugated being invented, I believe, in Germany in the late 1800s, and then getting big in the 1910s, 1920s. And so we were, fully engaged with making paper corrugated containers in the 1930s and then on. And, and for most of those decades, the customer could have any color they wanted as long as it was black. And, the years pass. So, and now we're literally, if you consider E. Murdoch to be, continuous with the rest of our company, we're literally coming up on our 200th anniversary. If you're a strict, interpretation of, incorporation dates, it's 100 years.
I mean, both, incredible feats for sure.
Well, it just implies a certain amount of stubbornness, and technically, if you believe the hype, I'm the 7th generation to work here.
I believe the hype.
Yeah, that's all pretty impressive. So then, how recently did you get into more of the kind of graphic oriented packaging and display? Is that, is that like a pre-COVID thing? Is that more recently?
Oh, it was definitely before COVID. We should talk about COVID. That was an amazing experience to go through. As a packaging producer, for everyone in the world, yes, but as a packaging producer, interesting consequences. I would say that our expansion into areas of color has sort of grown over time over the past 20 to 25 years. I remember feeding letter presses as a teenager in the late 80s, early 90s. Thick, viscous, metered ink, probably watered down with some sort of terrible alcohol. And then the transition to Flexo and being able to do multiple colors. probably 90s into 2000s. We were the first one in the region to have a 6-color press with a high core machine. I believe that came in the late 2000s, 2008, 2009. And these days, every machine we buy is multiple colors, sometimes inside outside print, and almost all of our machines have some die cutting capacity too.
Separate question we'll get to later, but I'm always curious how someone in your position goes about the buying process for a new machine. But if we have time, maybe we could get to that one later, because it's always curious about that, because those are not overnight decisions, big investments, obviously, expensive machinery.
Absolutely.
So let's get to everybody's favorite subject, which is tariffs. So I know you had mentioned that is something that keeps you up at night. So I mean, how has that impacted your business? You can talk about your business specifically, but also kind of the broader corrugated industry too. Maybe touch on both aspects there.
Happy to do so. I would say that it's mainly the stress and uncertainty over the past months. I'm not even sure that I have a full understanding today of what the specific consequences are. I know where our materials flow. I know where our raw materials come from. I know where our spare parts come from. But the inconsistency in the sort of landscape of tariffs is constantly evolving. And then if I have to rush order a spare part to keep a machine running from Europe right now, is it 15% more expensive than it used to be? I think it might be. If I'm buying high volumes of paper out of Canada or Mexico or Brazil, are those things 5, 10, and 25% more expensive than they used to be? I can't keep up. So when this particular merry-go-round ride began, I probably felt a little too strongly right out of the gate. I was expecting an increase in costs for us, which would poorly translate through into an increase in the prices for which we're able to sell things. That's not exactly what happened, but that was my initial sort of knee-jerk reaction, emphasis on jerk. I hear other people describe it as the same way. And so there's uncertainty and fluctuation in prices that affect our raw materials and our ability to maintain things. At the same time, I would say that tariffs are having a very, very powerful effect upon my sales force and my customer service team. The term onshoring has been around forever, and we are quoting things now that traditionally we would not have seen. And my customer service department is barely able to keep up right now. We are besieged with quotes. And my sales force feels the same way. Are any of them turning specifically into orders? It's not yet clear. There is an interesting time lag between quote and order, but some, we're pretty busy in the factory too.
Well, so that's interesting. So you're seeing both kind of, a negative view, but also a positive view, and the net gain is to be determined.
Yeah, I would say, maybe that was the intent of the tariffs in the first place, to encourage domestic manufacturing. If that's true, we're seeing it in the quoting process right now.
Which is excellent. I mean, from that perspective, that, there is some positive impact. But, I've had the opportunity to tour your facility. And Randy, if you're ever in Gardner, Mass., you should definitely go check it out. It's just like how many square feet do you have?
About 500,000.
Yeah. I mean, it is an impressive campus. Like you can't even really, it's a gigantic place. But you guys have like a large raw material supply store, right? Like, is that something that's typical, for, companies like yours, or is that a strategic advantage for you? Or
we do, you're mainly talking about paper. It would also be true of ink and glues and other consumables, but those are smaller potatoes, right? But we try to maintain an inventory of, 2 to 3 months of running inventory for the liner board and medium that we're consuming to make boxes. I believe that to be common, but it also might be true that there are very, very few people like us left in the landscape. I think I heard recently that there are less than 15 truly independent corrugators left in the United States. They are either part of larger companies or have, vested interest in their ownership that results in paper transactions, paper deals. If I was truly an integrated corrugated system, maybe those inventory levels would be lower. But we can't make boxes if we don't have the paper, so we try to keep the paper on hand.
Yep. Nope. I mean, it's an impressive. It's just the sheer volume and quantity of paper is incredible.
Sorry if I missed it, but how big are you guys employee wise? How many employees do you have?
About 130.
Yeah, it's a big operation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in the printing industry, sustainability is always a hot topic. So, kind of how are you guys going about achieving sustainability? How important is that to you guys as a company?
It's quite important. This question has at least two sides to it for me. You heard a little bit about my background from the beginning of our conversation, and so I would mention that my interpretation of sustainability is based upon that learning and those experiences, as an environmentalist, as a forester, as a data scientist, and carrying that through to here where it interacts with the world of selling and branding and consumption is an interesting experience. So for us, sustainability means, making decisions for the benefit of the future. And I would not be here in my role. I would not enjoy the things that I enjoy today had my predecessors made different decisions. And that's, that's almost a philosophical statement right there. But thinking about what it is for the people who might come after us is, for me at least, the heart of what sustainability is. And how that carries through to the specifics is where the rubber meets the road. We are green certified. We are able to make SFI and FSC certified boxes. We have a blanket implementation of a 70% recycled, FSC recycled, because that's the easy way to do it. We know what comes in, we know where it comes from, we can make a blanket statement about what's going out. Same deal for energy, wastewater, pollutants. And then, of course, there's a different set of things that customers demand from us. Lots and lots of compliance documentation, lots of things that, maybe we didn't know about 6 months ago. And this industry, maybe other printing industries, are probably under scrutiny for a lot of good reasons. And, there's an alphabet soup of chemical names that we could start talking about if we really want to go down that rabbit hole. And, some of them are a big deal. And we're having to learn ourselves about, what that means and what we need to do.
So, in terms of on the sustainability side of things, are you driving that? Are your customers driving that? And, maybe a pre-question is in terms of the makeup of your customers, like you do a lot in CPG, like, is that like a percentage of your business? What would you say is CPG versus, a company that's a manufacturer or something?
I would say there's a significant percentage of our business that's CPG type customers. There's also sort of an equally important sort of local entrepreneur, local small business and then there's the sort of the environment of Boston with the, those industries that exist in southern, coastal New England, biomedical and food and beverage and whatever else. I would say that we learn about things through customers' requests. You guys need to start paying attention to this. I need you to worry about PFAS. I need you to sign this document. I need you to have a coherent plan to achieve net carbon zero emissions by the year 2040. That's come up recently. And then what we do with it and how we respond and how we run with it is sort of internally directed.
That's very interesting. So, Randy, I mean, a lot, just like other label companies and packaging companies, like the regionality of the market very much, plays into the customers that Ben has overall. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, you attend some of these meetings where there's representation from all corners of the United States, and some of the things people in California are talking about versus some of the people in maybe Texas are talking about. And then you get into the Northeast. It's different directives. It's different, policies you need to adhere to, and yeah, I mean, a place like San Francisco versus, it's just, yeah, there are some next level sustainability features out there within, city to city, state to state.
So, question I had is, I mean, obviously, you just mentioned customer demands, and we're talking about sustainability and how that's kind of a driving force. But what about like just the way, like e-commerce and the way that, uh, corrugated packaging has shifted? Like, are what like interesting innovations have you seen? You talked about kind of two-sided print. I think when you say that, I think about kind of the the well-designed corrugated boxes that have kind of the marketing message when you open it. But it's also in the shipper. Like, have maybe speak to that a little bit and how that's evolved, and maybe any kind of favorite box that you've had. I'm sure you have some.
Oh, definitely. Everyone's got a story. Thank you for bringing that up, Ken. I would say that's an important aspect of the sustainability conversation with customers that I neglected to mention a minute ago. But, how much material are we using to make the box? What is the expectation of how the box performs, whether, on the shelf or in transit? Can we get away with using less fiber? What are the consequences if we go too far? There's a constant level of activity in that realm, which is in response to customer expectations of sustainability, but also has very serious consequences for price point, cost, and theoretically margin. So to think of an example, I have a small local business that we do a fair chunk of business with that came in recently for a press approval, and they had an e-commerce two-sided blueprint on craft. And their swatch book from the GCMI Glass Container Manufacturing Institute, I don't know if that's the right acronym or not, was so old that their blue color was not the same as our blue color. Okay. So we run over to the ink kitchen. We ask the person on press what it is that they want. We make a new bucket of ink. We have this job running within 10 minutes. And they leave with two-sided blueprint on a really lightweight e-commerce 32 ECT box. I'm using a lot of lingo. Stop me if you need to. And the blue on the inside and the blue on the outside exactly match. And I don't mean to pat ourselves in the back, but this talented, experienced customer of ours had this like look of wonder in her eyes. And she said, "That's literally the best press approval I've ever been on. You changed ink on the fly for me, registered, and had it done. Like, thank you. I can go home for lunch." So that went really well. But it was a very lightweight e-commerce box that they're using to get their product to their end user. And it was a gratifying experience.
I mean, so have you seen, I mean, I probably know the answer, but have you seen a meaningful shift? Like you're doing a lot of, I know you guys produce pop displays and things like that. Have you seen a noticeable shift toward, direct to consumer e-commerce?
Yes.
Yeah,
very definitely. It still remains a small percentage of our business, probably certainly less than 10, probably less than 5. But inside outside print, direct to consumer e-commerce, it was not here 10 years ago. Not, at least not the way it is now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's interesting to see kind of how you can kind of you see the market shifts long before maybe everyone else is really realizing it, because those products need to get packaged, right? And so you're beginning to see it, and you can kind of see where the wind is moving.
That's also true, Ken, of our business on the short term too. We're sort of talking about long-term trends of sustainability here, but even in the short term, this industry, probably all of printing, is a leading indicator for what the economy is doing. And I probably get more phone calls than I care to admit from analysts trying to figure out what's going on. And
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you know what's going on? Can you tell us?
Oh, yeah. God, no. I have no idea.
What should I invest in the next 2 years? Yeah.
I'll tell this one story. This is okay to be this informal? Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
Okay, right on. I got invited to a luncheon of bankers in Boston a year ago. And I like going to these things. I learned something, the lunch is okay. And then, And you sit down and there's a bunch of box making and packaging people that sit there and we ramble about various things and respond to questions. And I got pulled aside afterwards by this particular banker. And he seemed like a very interesting guy. I forget his name. And he said to me down in the coffee shop downstairs, I understand oil. I understand electricity. I understand produce. I don't understand paper. And that makes me angry. Could you please explain to me why paper does what it does financially? And I was like, oh man, we don't have enough time in the day to go over this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is complex. I mean, I don't know anything about it, but I know you, so I can ask questions. So I feel like I know something, you know.
Anytime, man. You have my number.
What do they say? It's not what you know, it's who you know. And I know Ben, so I feel like I got paper on lock.
By now, I only know what I know. I don't know what I don't know, right?
So playing on that, maybe something you don't know is marketing and self-promotion, as I've heard through the grapevine. So maybe you could tell us why. What's the downside to marketing and self-promotion?
See, this was the question I was most worried about for this conversation. Because you guys are clearly two accomplished, talented hosts, with your own businesses, and you invited some strange guy from New England on your podcast to talk about why he doesn't do things related to marketing and branding. So, and Ken knows this firsthand. So I thought a lot about this, and the short answer is that we have a brand, we have an image, and we just don't happen to be in control of it. And, we have a relationship with our customers based upon years of experience. My salespeople have pitches they apply when they are trying to land new opportunities. And we could and should do a better job in giving my salespeople the tools to present themselves. My web page is fine, not great. My trucks, which happen to be driving by right now, are fine and not great. So I very much need to delegate this responsibility for the promotion of our business, for the communication of our value proposition to the outside world, right? I need to delegate to that someone who has a passion for that. And why I do or do not have a passion for that probably gets into my own self-confidence and idiosyncrasies, which we don't need to get into. But
that's a deep dive.
That's different podcast.
Right.
We're just giving the people what they want to hear. But to make it less funny for a minute, I have always been part of the ownership of this company, and we have always been a large employer in this part of New England. I didn't talk about this place as a kid. I didn't talk about this place as a teenager. It was something removed, something external, and it would feel like bragging to talk about it, because you're an owner, and that's not how I want to come. That's certainly not how I wanted to come off as a young person,
So it's a learned trait, but you did say something that makes me think that you get it a lot more than you lead on. Is there's a reputation, right? Like, so as a brand owner, right? Like you just mentioned that you're an owner, and that there's a brand, so you're a brand owner. Like, no organization actually owns their brand, right? Like, they are the steward of the reputation, right? So the what we call the brand experience, this is what really, that's what it's all about. And all you can do is try to steward that, do your best to try to control the conversation. But at the end of the day, the market owns, your reputation, and that's, and it takes a long time to build, and it doesn't take that long to ruin. So
that's well said, Ken. Absolutely. And to spin off that for a minute, I have 600 active customers. Annual sales probably significant. I had a very challenging experience with a customer yesterday where we disappointed them unexpectedly. And I spent many hours yesterday and last night and this morning, working to try to find a way to salvage this particular order, salvage this relationship. And it should be fine in the end. But that's part of, following through on our value proposition, demonstrating the value of us as a vendor and being the brand that they expect us to be. But that's as stressful as that was, it was a very specific, customer directed, responsive, controlled interaction. And for me, at least, the idea of having a more diffuse, scripted, outreach strategy is less controlled. And I'll give that responsibility to someone else, and I'll be the guy who takes it on the chin when we screw up.
Well, I mean, I can attest to your the brand experience that I had when you were a vendor for me, and that, like, I recognize that I was setting extremely high standards, and that we're not your biggest customer. And I'm like, if I bother them too much, like, they might just say, we don't want to do it anymore. And then that would be like a whole bunch of crap that I had to deal with. Go try to find someone else that could produce that box. But
never even crossed my mind.
I think that it speaks volumes, is that it was, you guys just did your best, and it was more than enough. And, so I appreciate that experience. And I think it says a lot about, every customer matters to you. And I think that,
but we, thank you for saying that. We grew from that experience, and this customer that we disappointed, it's not me, it's the we, that we disappointed yesterday. The things that I learned about color and spectrophotometry and statistically measuring color from your previous employer, I 100% used with these other people on a 5-color job with varnish. And so, we improve as a company through the demands of our customers.
Growth happens in discomfort, right?
There you
That's
go.
what it comes down to. So, talk about brand experience and stuff. Like, I don't know, you had mentioned COVID, so I'm kind of curious to hear that story a little.
It was amazing. It was super stressful. Amazing growth opportunity. So the pandemic hits. It becomes a fearful, uncertain subject for everyone in the economy. And our bookings start to rise. We figure out internal policies for trying to keep, are we a essential business or not? Can we expect people to come to work or not? What's our testing procedure? What do we do when when the 2 little lines show up on the testing stick? All these challenging details of running a business in this period of time. Meanwhile, I've got friends and associates who are completely shut down and stressed out for those reasons. And then our bookings start to rise. And so then during the pandemic, we experienced easily a 25 to 30% increase in bookings. And the amount of people we had on staff to run those machines was crashing at the same time, whether because they were sick or they didn't want to come to work. If my coworkers ever listen to this, they're going to say, "Oh God, here comes this story again." But I ran a flatbed die cutter on second shift, 2 days a week for most of the pandemic. We ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months to try to keep up with the orders that were coming in. A normal month of business for us is something in the neighborhood of 35 to 36 million square feet of product. And we were easily in the 50s during the pandemic. And then all of a sudden it was over. And then all of a sudden the bookings crashed. And the language becomes more about everyone has excess inventory. We're now in a destocking period. Like, the orders were 10% below what was normal, which was a different series of problems. And all of this happened, of course, over the 2 to 3 year period of the crescendo of the pandemic. And now here we are, 4 or 5 years after the peak of it, and things sort of feel like they've reverted to the trend lines. What normal growth is for us, what normal bookings are, is sort of above where it was before the pandemic. But boy, it was a crazy experience.
So any like major takeaways, like anything that you carried that you learned during that time that you know have stayed with you, other than just you know keep swimming?
It's a little emotional, but the people with whom I worked, whether on the factory floor or in the office itself, who took a deep breath, put their nose to the grindstone and helped push through. Like, my appreciation for them and gratitude is even higher than it used to be. It's hard to express how much, because you were all fighting together, and keeping those people and keeping them here and keeping them properly compensated and happy is crucial.
Well, I'm glad we're through
That got
it.
dramatic. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I like it.
No,
I mean,
no, that's
the music was going to start playing in the
yeah.
background.
We can type that in afterwards, right, Ken? Yeah.
We'll let Josh do
Um,
that.
Do that in post.
So I mentioned before, I wanted to ask you about how you go about the decision-making process with maybe new machinery or new equipment. So talk about some of those recent investments you may have made and how you went about, how you go about that, because those aren't easy decisions.
Yep. Traditionally, our company has purchased, used, and fixed things. That was very much the experience that my grandfather and father went through. And I remember my very first day here coming to work and seeing the installation of a used and rehabilitated Saturn III flexofolder gluer. Yeah, it's a classic machine for anybody in the corrugated industry, and that machine's still running today. But it was purchased, refurbished, brought back to new condition, and it's been running great ever since, mostly. More recently, we are buying new. And in the past 2 years, we have invested in our own corrugator, single pass digital, a new 5-color flexo die cutter, and a new flatbed die cutter with camera registration. So we've spent a bunch of money on new equipment over the past few years, and the process of making those decisions is one part technical specs and thinking about your need, which is always compared to what you're replacing, for us at least. Okay, this is what's going to be new. It's taken this machine out. What do we be able to do that's new and different? What capabilities are we losing if we sell this old machine? There's always a high degree of interaction with the OEM and the vendor, and the way that they approach people like us and the pitch they give is highly variable. And then I would say that in the end, we try to make thrifty purchases with cash for machines that we think are going to be easy to maintain. I'm thinking of one particular press next door whose OEM shall remain nameless, and my maintenance guys can't even touch the thing. It's so computerized. And I'm not even talking about the digital. Something goes wrong on that, you got to figure out which blinky light it is and call overseas. That's annoying.
It's like new cars, right?
Like, oh God, what idiot light is that?
Right.
And now that we're into single pass digital, there's going to be more of that. That is something of although the need to maintain and clean that machine is paramount, it's a little bit of a black box in terms of how it runs. And we're just going to have to learn with that. And, is my maintenance guy of the future walking over to the press with a really nice laptop and a 2-way Ethernet cable? I think they probably are.
So that's interesting. So obviously there's, you kind of mentioned, price and capability, but your ability to service it. Are there any particulars that you look for in the vendor in terms of service or location or regionality or warranties or, what are the...
Most of that is based upon traditional relationships. We've been around long enough, and they all know us. We have our traditional favorites. That's changed over time. the questions that I'll ask a vendor when they're giving us a pitch is, where is this machine made? Where are the spare parts coming from? How many installs do you have that are running in North America, and how many service techs do you have? And you get interesting answers to that, but when a machine is down and customers are unhappy, it gets, blood pressures rise quickly. And if they've got two technicians in the United States worrying about 65 different machines, and one of them's in Duluth and one of them's in Saskatchewan, what am I going to do? So it's for me, at least for us, I think it's really about keeping the machines running. And we do a pretty good job internally, but as machines get more and more involved, robot feeding, robot stacking, they're harder to take care of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's across almost all industries, right? Like as technology kind of deepens into what has been historically mechanical processes, it adds a level of efficiency, but with the level of complexity, right? That is a trade-off there. Yeah, no. So one more question on that: are those companies consistently telling you about the new capabilities of a machine, or you have self-identified yourself as like, we need this because a customer's asking, and so you go look for it?
Or do you go to a trade show and look
Right,
for
or a
it?
trade
Because
show, right?
I'm on the trade show side of things, so like,
Well,
Yeah.
that's the same thing, right? Like you go into the trade show to see what's new. Like, are you going to look for it, or is there a demand of you that it makes you go look for it? Are you looking for a new piece of machinery to add to, to give your salesman an added opportunity to sell? Like, what's that decision tree?
So the trade shows are valuable. They're not just about the, expensive dinners and 4 o'clock beers. I learn quite a bit by walking the show floor, seeing what people are talking about. I will learn new things. Hey, I didn't know that machine could do that. I didn't know this double-sided tape could be applied that way. I didn't know this stacker had this particular, drive mechanism. So the sales force the salespeople for these vendors are visiting us on a regular basis, and there is still at least an active, group of veteran salespeople out there pitching to us machines and advancements and capabilities. So most of the time it happens this way, through learning, through interaction, learning through trade shows. But there are certainly things that we have gone to find. My production manager, who is taking my role as sales manager, got very, very focused on the subject of e-commerce 8 or 9 or 10 years ago. And he said, we need this. Here's what I think we should buy. And let's go and add a print down to an existing machine so that it can print 2 sides simultaneously. If we were buying something new, we could add that capability to the bill of materials, right? We opened up one of our presses and dropped the capability in. And he had a financial analysis about, this is how much work I think we're going to get, and these are the types of items I think we're going to be around. And he was 100% right. And it was great that we did that. Whether or not my next rotary die cutter will have that capability will depend, but it's now an important part of our business. And the same would be true of single pass digital print. Maybe because I'm secretly a giant nerd, when I got here, I was very, very interested in digital print. And I bought a slow as molasses multi-pass digital printer. Then I bought a not so slow as molasses multi-pass digital printer from a different company. And now we've jumped to single pass digital, which is very, very fast and capable, slightly reduced print quality. And we've run 10 jobs in the past week that we wouldn't have been able to touch the week before. And I convinced myself that was part of our future. And, I visited all the manufacturers. I know who sells what. I made the particular purchase decision that I did based on those relationships, based on those site visits, based on that maintenance capability. And I'm hopeful it will be quite successful.
Yeah, so to sum up what you kind of said, it's all of the above in a lot of ways, right? Like you're in touch with your needs, coming from your customer, identified opportunities, you're visiting shows to, educate yourself on what's happening and what's new. And then there's salespeople that you trust that, you know, you, you know that they're there to make a sale, but they also know your business and are trying to, you know, help your business grow, kind of a rising tide lifts all boats mentality.
Yep. Good
That's good.
summary.
This is exactly how it's supposed to be. So I'm happy that's how it's happening.
I didn't know there were rules.
So okay, so we're getting close on time, but there is one thing on top of what we just talked about, not on the machinery side, but investments in people. I know workforce development is a huge thing on the narrow web side. So do you see those same challenges in corrugated, or do you have a because you've been around so long a pretty stable pipeline of people interested when roles are open, or do you find that challenging?
We tend to do better with internal advancement, and I'm leaving the judgment out of that. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. But we're in the midst of a process right now where 4 or 5 or 6 people are all taking a step to the right and advancing. Um, we know they were good at their previous jobs. We think they'll be good at their next job. So on the all right, 1, 2, 3, everybody step to the right, and there'll be some drama from that. There'll be some challenges. We have recruited from outside before, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. I think we have some old-fashioned habits here that people respond negatively to sometimes. But in terms of advancing the people who are here, it is important. I do think we could do a better job with it. Um, you know, it's a little reactive right now. If someone finds an opportunity for learning or self-advancement or education, I'm gonna, especially now that I'm the president, I'm gonna seriously consider any request and try to make it happen for someone. I want to go to this trade show. I need to go on this trip to see these machines. I need to take this course. That's another way that we have to get better. In the factory environment, um, uh, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, my average tenure in the working environment next door is probably 25 to 30 years. And I had guys who were retiring after 40 to 50. We are in a different place now. When I was the production manager, I never once hired any temps. The production manager who replaced me went through 80 in a year.
Okay.
So the world is different. And is that some sort of post-pandemic phenomena that everyone in the world is enduring now? I don't know. But when we find those individuals who are going to stick here, learn, work hard, be able to run machines, we need to do anything we can to, encourage them, train them, promote them, and give them opportunities for advancement. And then we need to do better on that.
Yeah, but I think we see that across. We're fortunate enough to be in a lot of different verticals, not just kind of the packaging space, and that's across everywhere. There is a kind of the entry level worker, has from my perspective, they have a need for some instant gratification, and you know, as an individual contributor, they're all worth it, but uh, people need to kind of earn they need to learn and create some experience to be really worth it, right? And so they need to step in and kind of pay their dues, and then they generate a lot of value. So I think there's a lot of too many people telling them to expect too much, which is only a letdown. Like there's this great saying that happiness is expectation minus reality, right? And I think that applies to so many things, including someone's career, right? Like if they come out of college or they come out of high school or wherever they're coming from and their expectation is too high, then they're kind of set up for a perpetual letdown. And that's a hard place to be. I think we see that across all verticals. And that's not saying there's a lot of really great young people that are hard workers, and they're dynamic, and they're just you got to kind of sift through them a little bit more, right? So
Very
There you go.
unrealistic demands as well for someone that
correct.
that has no experience whatsoever.
Yes. So I wanted to ask about the consolidation, right? I'm sure there's probably going to be some people listening to this episode to hear, like, are you guys selling? I know you're not, or at least I don't think you are, but everyone, there's a lot of consolidation in your market, and I'm sure you get
Gosh,
offered
yeah.
all the time. So maybe just speak to that, because it's always a topic of conversation within
Yeah.
kind of the packaging space.
Certainly a lot of news in the past year about these trends, right? And it always has been. I have an old PowerPoint presentation that I've given to customers before, which has a pie chart showing the production of paper by vendor in 1985 versus 2005. And there were easily 3 dozen different sources of paper that someone could choose from at that period of time, and now it is a very different landscape. There have been the sort of what was the big five is now the big three. I've done pretty well at not mentioning, brand specific names so far in this conversation, but, Smurf Rock is very powerful. And, IPGP, these guys control a lot of material. At the same time, there are, at least in my opinion, very, very powerful below the radar roll-ups that are happening, where slightly less commonly known names are acquiring facility after facility after facility after facility. And I'll leave their specifics out of this. Sorry. We do get solicitations every few months, every year, certainly. We've never really paid much attention to them because we just keep coming to work every day and doing our jobs. Um, um, but this has an important effect upon the landscape. And the traditional dichotomy of independent versus integrated is evolving. The integrateds remain enormous and powerful, and the independents are just disappearing or combining together. There are some very big, powerful independents out there. We are completely medium-sized, if not small. So it's happening. What does this mean for the future? You guys probably have your own thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I'll save them for a different episode, or trying to keep friends here.
Well, so one of the questions might be like, why is this happening? Why are these waves of consolidation? And I think this is a capital intensive, low margin business. I think it's tough. Making paper is expensive. Building a new paper mill is shocking amounts of money. And then you're taking your product out to the market and you're trying to use it in an internal system, and then some small percentage of it gets sold on the side to these irritating independents who think they deserve lower prices. Like, that's challenging.
Yep, for sure. So, I mean, do you, before we started recording, you were talking about AICC. Are organizations like that important to you? Like, are they kind of helping you fight the fight on the independent side?
I have very much benefited from my membership and learning in AICC over the years. I've only had very casual interactions with their sort of higher altitude political activities. Do they have a presence in Washington? Are they negotiating on the behalf of the independents in that context? I don't know as much about that, but the learning has been priceless. The meetings, the trade shows, very valuable. I mean, I certainly don't go to every single meeting. I don't have the social stamina for that, but it's going once or twice a year is good. And I'm going to be in Chicago for the upcoming annual meeting.
So we have some closing things we always do with our guests. Ben, anything you want to plug? Anything you've got going on?
Appreciate the opportunity to say that. We're very excited about our experience with EFI and the single pass digital print. My sales force is going to be out there trying to land opportunities for this particular tech. It's high quality, it's high speed, it's a competitive price point. And I'm not going to show you any of the print samples that are cluttering the other side of my office, but it is shockingly good print. So very, very excited about that. I think that's probably the only plug I would want to drop right now.
Did you so EFI put their innovation center or I don't know what they call it up in the town I grew up in. Did you go up there or is it in
Manchester or Londonderry?
Londonderry?
Yeah, they one of the companies they acquired was originally in Londonderry, and then they've sort of built an experience center down in Manchester as well. Talking about proximity and support, that was definitely one of the factors that pushed me to make the decision that I did.
That facility cool. I haven't been there.
I haven't been to Londonderry, but Manchester is gorgeous.
Okay, cool.
Lots of plate glass, lots of shiny metal. Lots of machines being worked on in the corners. I think it's mainly their multi-pass customer experience.
Okay, very cool. I'll have to check it out. I was just up there this past weekend, and when I was driving to the airport, I saw the EFI sign. I was like, oh yeah, they're right here. So it's top of mind.
New Hampshire?
New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire.
For us, Midwest, for those that aren't in the Northeast, we need to, okay, just clarifying, just clarifying. Yes. Not everyone
grew up in southern New Hampshire.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay,
your New Hampshire is showing, Ken. Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
All right, and then just real quick, some rapid fire questions on branding. We ask all our guests, Ben. So, what is your favorite brand?
If my Instagram feed is any indicator, it is Benchmade Knives and Old Town Canoes. I'm going to avoid all the potential customers and CPGs here, okay?
The other guest answer, though, is that's fine, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely seem to have a preference for legacy brands making outdoor equipment.
Very cool.
Lincoln Canoe and Kayak, Old Town Canoe. I didn't get my annual retreat to the Great North Woods this year, so I'm feeling a little.
What do you think about those, like the foldable kayaks?
Pretty cool. I've seen them used.
Right, they're doing that in what are they making that out of? It's like the plastic corrugated, right?
There's some sort of like high density polyethylene, I think.
Yeah.
You're like erecting it around a frame. I used to lead sea kayaking trips for children. I have a preference for sort of a hard rotomolded shell that'll take an impact. Yeah. But that probably says more about how I kayak, at least in my younger days. But I have also been seeing that. I think the brand name might be Oru.
Yeah, it's Oru. Yep.
Yeah, those are coming up a lot now too. The AI has a beat on me in terms of what I like to see.
You probably could make one there.
There is a local. I could plug this, but it's so specific. There is a downhill boxcar race coming up in town, which I think we're going to enter for the first time for some sort of local. And we're going to make the world's most amazing digitally printed corrugated car, and then push it down. We haven't figured out who's going to be driving yet. I say no, thank you. But we're gonna win the race through the power of corrugated.
Well, there's an excellent thing to market.
Record that, yeah. Get some video on that. All right. What about the opposite end of the spectrum? Least favorite brand.
Also avoid any customers.
I would.
Yeah, definitely don't go customers here.
This is definitely going to get cut here, but I would prefer not to be negative. But I will admit that I had a profound nausea recently while taking my daughter to a K-pop Demon Hunter movie, and there was just like too many colors and too much volume, and it was like a serious old man movement, and it's apparently an unbelievably popular brand and Netflix promotion thing right now, and I was like, I do not know what's happening right now. I need to go sit in a dark room and be quiet for a while.
So okay, my daughter watched it on Netflix, but now it's in theaters as well. Like I read that it was so popular they've put it in theaters. Is that what's happened?
I took she and some of her friends to an evening showing this past weekend, and I briefly volunteered to sit to go see the movie with them. And my daughter, being the lovely person that she is, says, "Dad, you do not want to do that." But man, that is a lot. I mean, children's cartoons in general give me a headache these days, but that's because I'm an old man.
Yeah.
So I'm going to avoid all the consumer brands here.
No, that's in the position you're in. That's probably a wise move. And just to end, best business book you've read, or any book you've read recently that you'd recommend to other listeners.
Um, I went to my bookcase this morning to try to. I have been enjoying Malcolm Gladwell Outliers recently. And I'm sure that's a very popular answer to that. I'm slightly more than halfway through it, and I have over the past 10 years been slowly forcing my way through this, which is Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. This is a very, very strange book written in the 1840s about how various bubbles have happened. Like there's an entire chapter dedicated to tulips in Holland.
Okay.
My understanding is this is commonly used in MBA curricula, and it is a very old school English. It's
Is
a
that
slow.
book just hanging around the building, or did you get to buy that separately?
I think it's been here since it was new. I know.
Wow, that's got to be
Nah,
a tough
somebody-
read with that old English. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Oh, is it time for the dramatic reading of the angry accounting letter to end on?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
All right, just to show you that nothing ever changes here.
So what's the year on this? This is late 1800s?
94.
Okay.
All right, and I'm again, out of respect for the brands, I'm going to leave the brands out of it, okay? So the context here, guys, is we have amazing historical records, just like box after box of old school transcripts, carbon copies, handwritten letters. You know, we really should do something to preserve all these things. But apparently, somebody got mad in 1894, and I hope you guys cut this before you release your episode, but this was a letter to a customer in Brooklyn, New York. June 8th, 1894. Gentlemen, your favor of the 7th at hand. In reply, we would say that our past experience with you has been of such a nature that we do not care to sell you any more goods. We do not doubt that you intend to pay for them, and that ultimately you will pay for them, but at the price for which we are selling, we cannot afford to wait more than 60 days for our money. There is no need for you to call us on this experience. We are perfectly acquainted well with the details. And until we are satisfied that you will pay, we do not care to sell you anymore.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Oh, man, and I have that conversation all the time.
Yeah.
But not with such flowery language, though.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, that is, yeah.
People just had so much more like decorum and class back then. Even when they're angry, they're still
Yeah,
like,
but there's so much like passive aggressive,
Oh.
like backhandedness in that too. You know,
Yeah.
it's a good one.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, yeah, I think
Guys,
that
this
does
was
it.
fun.
I mean,
Thank you.
No, we
really
appreciate it,
appreciate
Ben.
you.
You've been awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time, and it's always a pleasure talking to you. And
Likewise.
I think we can, hopefully have you back on at some point in the future when you have time. And I think the audience will really enjoy getting to know Ben Urquhart and kind of the New England Woodenware new packaging story. And I've always been impressed by you, and so I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk with you both, and let me know if there's anything else I can do for you.
Will do.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Bye, guys.
Thanks so much for joining us on Unpacking the Brand. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And if you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have a moment, we'd love it if you could share this podcast with your network or leave us a review. It really helps us reach more people who are passionate about business, branding, and innovation.